Hey guys, Buildzoid here, and today we're going to be doing some low-effort content, because I still don't have a Gigabyte 800 series motherboard, um, and I plan to buy one, and so we're going to go through Gigabyte's entire X870, B850, B840 motherboard lineup, and see which one it is that I end up like settling on in terms of purchases, and obviously I'm just going to share my thoughts on Gigabyte's boards. So with that out of the way, let's get into it. Starting off with the X870E Aorus Extreme, which I'm obviously not going to be buying because this costs way too much. Even though I do think it has kind of some pretty neat features, like it has dual X8 PCIe support, like PCIe, two PCIe X8 slots, right? So you get X16 with if you have nothing in here, you get X16. And then down here you have an X2. That X2, like, I'm not a fan of that. Because that's not really that useful. I'm not really aware of any PCIe cards that actually have an X2 connector. Like, capture cards and stuff are usually X4. And networking cards, at least like high-speed networking cards, are usually also like X4 or higher. And then if you're talking like sound cards or something, those are like X1. So yeah, 4.0 X2 is like, I'm not really a big fan of that type of PCIe slot. But having the option to actually run dual GPUs on this is pretty cool. Not necessary for everyone. So this really is like a feature that, like, if you know you need it, you need it. If you don't need it, you really don't need it. Anyway, so that's like the one unique thing for this board in Gigabyte's lineup. They don't have any other boards that I'm aware of that have dual X8. Other than that, it also has dual 10 gig LAN, which is pretty neat. I'm not aware of any 800 series boards that do that. And so that's cool. But in terms of the actual, like the purpose for me of buying a Gigabyte motherboard for 800 series is to test the memory overclocking and test the VRM. And in that department, well, on the memory side of things, this is an 8-layer PCB. Guess what else is an 8-layer PCB? The master. And this is going to have the exact same memory topology as this. These are just going to use the same memory topology. It's the same PCB material, right? Both of them are on low loss, and both of them are 8 layers. So that's going to be the exact same memory topology, should basically have the exact same memory overclocking performance. They both have postcodes, which is cool. This also has some voltage read points up here. I wonder if the... Oh, it looks like they didn't squeeze the voltage read point. Oh, no. I'm pretty... That might be voltage read points over there. But anyway, so this board is kind of neat in terms of, like, connectivity options, but as far as just, like, testing memory overclocking goes, I don't really care. And as far as testing the VRM goes, based on my past experiences with Gigabyte boards, like, this does have some SMD polymers in the render over here. But in my experience, they don't make a difference. Like, unfortunately, Gigabyte's approach to their VRM design is that they kind of copy-paste the voltage controller, like, configuration from board to board. So, like, I most clearly remember this for Z690, where, like, even the Z690 Elite has the exact same voltage regulation performance as a Z690 Tachyon, because the controller is the same, and the controller configuration is the same. Which is, actually, I don't think it was the Elite. It was, like, the Pro. Like, it was some significantly lower layer, like, lower end board, lower PCB layer count, worse capacitors. Like, by every right, it should have had somewhat, worse voltage regulation. In practice, they performed exactly the same. Like, as in, for measurements, the measurements for both boards were within, like, 10 millivolts of each other, which I found incredibly disappointing because, I was really hoping for the Tachyon to be, like, amazing in the voltage regulation department, and it wasn't bad. It was just the same as, like, a much, much, much cheaper board, so kind of disappointing. And with this right here, so it's kind of funny, is the X670E Aorus Extreme is actually 18 phases, like, properly, like, 18 because it uses a 20 phase control. Actually, it might be more phases than that, but it used, like, a really high phase count controller, so it didn't have to do this whole, like, oh, we take 9 PWM signals and shove it into 18 power stages, which is what this is doing. And the reason this is doing that is because the X670E board is Renesas, and Renesas has, like, a 20 phase controller, but Infineon doesn't. And these are Infineon 110 amp power stages, which might actually be the most efficient 110 amp power stages there are, because there's like a 90 amp power stage from Infineon that's just insane in terms of peak efficiency. At least according to Infineon. I haven't, like, it's really hard to verify if that's like a measuring difference between the different power stage manufacturers, or if that power stage really is just better than everything else that exists. So that might be a similar scenario where these are just insanely efficient Infineon power stages. Because the funny thing with that like 110 amp label is once you go past like 60 amps nominal current on power stages, these labels get very not useful. Like, there's quite a few power stages where I strongly suspect that their insanely high nominal current rating is just a case of, oh, we set the overcurrent protection much higher than normal, rather than actually being like a higher efficiency component. But anyway, so these are Infineon power stages. Infineon doesn't have a 20-phase controller, so Gigabyte is using, this is probably going to be an XDPE, the 16-phase controller from Infineon. And they're running it in a 9-phase configuration into 18 power stages, which, you know, there's nothing really wrong with doing that. It's just kind of funny that this technically has less less phases, but it's not actually going to affect performance. However, the one concern I do have with the Infineon controller on a AMD Gigabyte motherboard is the one X670 board that I tested that has an Infineon controller also has the worst voltage regulation I measured on any 600 series board. Now, this doesn't affect stock operation at all, and if you're on like a low core count CPU, it doesn't matter. But if you're doing static overclocks on a high core count CPU, it can be a problem, because in like static overclocking scenarios, like the VRM the voltage regulation from the motherboard actually starts to matter a lot, because you lose the clock stretching mechanism that the stock boost algorithm uses for dealing with like significant amounts of core voltage undershoot. And yeah, so that's like the one thing with this VRM where it's like, you know, this might actually have worse voltage regulation than the 600 series board. Not that the Renesas 600 series boards from Gigabyte were particularly amazing, but they were better than that one Infineon board I tested, which I did find extremely disappointing. And I do plan to retest that Infineon board, because now I have some better measurement methodologies. So, like, I'm kind of hoping that maybe that was just a measurement error, but this trend of me testing Gigabyte boards and finding that their voltage regulation, especially on the AMD side, is horrendous, is, like, this has been happening for a while now, that I've, like I'd measure a Gigabyte AM4 motherboard, and the voltage regulation was just horrible. And I think the reason for it is that the stock, like the specification from AMD for the voltage regulation is not very demanding, because of that clock stretching mechanism that AMD uses, where it's like, yeah, there's very little V-droop on the default load, like the default AMD load line spec is very low V-droop, and so the CPU fully expects there to be just a bunch of undershoot all over the place, and the CPU is meant to deal with that. And I think because of that, Gigabyte's like AM5 VRM configurations, like, yeah, they just follow the AMD spec, and then when you go into static overclocking, you're stuck with not great voltage regulation as a result of that. Yeah, that is like the one concern I have with this board, is like the voltage regulation on this might be actually worse than its predecessor. But without measuring that, like, I can't be certain, and that's just a suspicion I have. And that would be the main reason I'd actually want to buy the Master, because the Master has the same power stages, same VRM controller, just lower phase count. Well, technically lower phase count. There's one phase less, and there's 2 power stages less. That's not going to affect the voltage regulation, by the way, because the thing I'm complaining about is basically the programming of the VRM controller itself. Gigabyte doesn't tend to tune the controller very much, in my experience. So these 2 boards, I would fully expect to have exactly the same voltage regulation if they use the same voltage controller. So if this one is bad, this one's also going to be bad, and if this one is good, this one's also going to be good. So that would be like the main reason I would want to test a Master, is like I would actually get to test this controller. And also this has the best PCB like memory topology that Gigabyte offers with their AM5 lineup for X870. I also like the PCIe configuration, like the 4.0 X4. This is perfect for like capture cards. Big fan of that. And also you get a 3.0 X4, which I think there's also some capture cards that you could put into that. Probably some networking cards as well. So I like the flexibility of just having PCIe X4 slots as well. Whereas the PCIe X2 is just like, I actually don't know what you would put into that other than an audio card. And that, like, an audio card uses X1, and that doesn't need X2. But anyway, so I do like the PCIe configuration on this. We have a postcode, big fan of that. Power button, reset button, voltage read points, VRM, like massive overkill in terms of actual like current handling capacity, massive overkill for any CPU that you can put into this socket. Connectivity looks fine to me. I mean, I mostly just care about having enough USB Type A, and this is plenty. I'm not sure why they're bothering with the fan cutout on a VRM like this. It's just, oh well. I wonder, do they actually mention that? No. No, they don't. But, yeah, so this board, the issue I have with this board is that it's not very representative of the rest of Gigabyte's motherboard lineup. Especially in, say, the memory overclocking department, because like I said, 8-layer PCB, low loss PCB. And then if you go down to, let's say, the Aorus Pro, which is the next board down in the lineup, that's on a 6-layer PCB with a mid-loss material. So that's a big difference, right? So if, like, I'm testing memory overclocks on this board should be better at memory overclocking than this is. And so if I'm like, oh, on this board it's super easy to do DDR5 8000, well, that doesn't tell us if it's super easy to do DDR5 8000 on this board, right? It's just, like, they're completely different memory topologies at that point, right? Like 6-layer PCB, different substrate material, that is a big difference. So this board, to me, like I want to test one, just because it's, like, interesting, is it's, like, the best topology that Gigabyte offers with a VRM that I wonder if they actually fixed the controller tuning from the 600 series boards, at least like the 600 series boards that used an Infineon controller. I wonder about that. Also, I'd kind of be interested in testing these power stages against some running a test of, like, hey, how hot do these power stages get if there's no heatsink on top of them compared to some other boards. But yeah, this board isn't very representative of the rest of Gigabyte's motherboard lineup, so from, like, a video usefulness perspective, this board is not great, in my opinion. This, on the other hand, I think is just straight up unnecessary. I don't like this board, not because there's anything fundamentally wrong with it, but because the Elite exists. Actually, yeah, the X870E Elite. The Aorus Pro and the Elite basically do the same things. And this is actually my favorite board in Gigabyte's X870 lineup, because it just kind of does all, like, if I wanted to swap the motherboard in my daily system, I could put this in there and not really notice a difference. That's why I like this board so much. Right? We've got a postcode, we've got a power button, reset button, we got the PCIe 4.0 X4 slot, which I care so much about. And so that's the thing for me with this board. Now, actually sort of all of Gigabyte's lineup, except the Aorus Extreme AI, does this thing where you get 3 Gen 5 M.2 slots, but the way these are generated is they actually steal PCIe lanes from that X16. But that happens on the Elite, it happens on the Pro, like every single one of these Gigabyte boards does this. So as much as I'm not a fan of it, where it's like, oh, if you install more than 2 SSDs into the board, you start losing GPU PCIe lanes. It also happens on every single board that Gigabyte makes. So, you know, this isn't like an argument against or for the Pro, because it's like, well, the Elite does this, the Pro does this, the Master does this, every single one of these boards does this. So if you want a board that doesn't do this, you can't have a Gigabyte board, basically. At least not one of these higher-end ones. So anyway, And the Pro compared to the Elite is just not great, right? Because on the Elite, I believe this is on like 60 amp power stages, and it's like, oh, the Pro is on 80s. Well, that's really going to not make a difference when you put a 9800 X3D in the board, and even if you put a 9950 X3D into the board, you can power, like a 9950 X3D is perfectly runnable on a 1660 amp power stages. Like, you don't need anything crazy to power a 9950X. So this whole like, oh, bigger, yeah, so this is on 60 amp DR MOS, whereas, oh, I guess this is on 80 amp smart power stages, but that like really doesn't make too much of a difference. This might be an Infineon VRM in that case, if this is on smart power stages. But ultimately, like, this is not a, like, 60 amp DR MOS components can power a 9950X just fine. Like, honestly, even just 12 60 amp DR MOS components, or even 10 if you have a big enough heatsink, will power a 9950X without any issues. So this whole like, oh, this has 80 amp power stages, yeah, that isn't really a relevant improvement as far as I'm concerned to the motherboard, right? In terms of connectivity, this is functionally the same. It has the same PCIe lane sharing. It has the same PCIe slot configuration. They both have the postcode and the power button, the reset button. And then in the rear I/O, I do believe they're actually identical. Okay, no, you get one extra red USB port, but you lose one of the blue ones. Oh, no, wait. Okay, you get one, is it? So you still get your 4 blue ones. You don't get 4 black ones. Yeah, so you lose 2 of the black USB ports and gain 1 red one. That is like, I see absolutely no reason to buy a Pro compared to the Elite. Like, these are functionally, to me, these are functionally the same motherboard, except one of them is cheaper. I'm buying the cheaper one. It's really that simple. So that's why the X870 Elite is like, I think this board in Gigabyte's AM5 lineup is sort of the most interesting, because it sort of ticks all of the boxes for features I care about. Has plenty of USB Type-A. Basically every board now has 2.5 gig LAN as standard, so, you know, that's not anything special. But it's also not like bad. It's just like, that's what you get most of the time, at least on the higher end boards. It has a postcode, which I do care a lot about. So this is one of the cheaper options for getting a postcode. And then the main reason I wouldn't take the non-E Aorus Elite is that the non-E Aorus Elite has a worse PCIe slot configuration, right? So we're going to take a look at that board quickly. Though this still has a postcode. Like, and the funny thing is, like, yeah, so this still has the postcode, power button, reset button, but then you get the PCIe 4.0. Well, actually, you do get a 4.0 by 4. Wait, really? Am I misremembering something? I remember being really annoyed about something with the PCIe lane sharing on the non-E Elite. Where's the black one? Because I'm wondering if the white one is, like, different. by 4. Okay, we're going to have to go to the motherboard manual. Oh, I remember what it is. It's this one. Yeah, this PCIe slot is on a switch now with this 4.0 by 4. So basically, on this board, if you put 2 M.2 SSDs into it, you can put one of them on a Gen 5 and one of them on the Gen 4, and you still keep this Gen 4 lane, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, still keep that Gen 4 PCIe slot, whereas on this board, if you do that, this PCIe 4.0 by 4 gets disabled, which, yeah, pretty inconvenient. Though, so we're going to take a look at the manual, because Gigabyte tends to provide, like, really good block diagrams for their boards. But I guess, like, if you don't care about the, like, losing PCIe lanes from your GPU, okay, these are the manuals. Yeah, so this is the X870E. And you can see how, yeah, like, you just get this PCIe 4.0 by 4 into this M.2, and then you get the other PCIe 4.0 by 4 off of the secondary chipset. Right? So that, like, that 4.0 by 4 M.2 slot isn't sharing lanes with this. However, on the X870 Elite, because you don't have two chipsets, you just have one chipset, right? Like X870E is just two X870s glued together. But because you only have one chipset, there's a switch over here. So if you want to run two SSDs and, say, a capture card, you'd have to put your two SSDs over here, and your GPU would run at X8. Not really the end of the world, but like so it depends. So this is like the cheapest board from Gigabyte, where you don't have, like, you don't really need to think about your PCIe lane allocation so much. Right, and if you actually fully populate this with M.2 drives, then you do still keep that PCIe 4.0, right? Because you could have, you could fully populate these, you can populate that. That's going to drop your GPU to X8, but that's not really the end of the world. You could populate this as well, so you can put 4 M.2 SSDs on here, and that PCIe by 4 still works at by 4. Whereas on this, if you put more than 3 SSDs into this board, you lose that PCIe by 4 lane. I mean, PCIe by 4 slot. So that's kind of the one downside to the X870 non-E motherboards. But this is, like, from a motherboard for testing perspective. This actually, like the X870 Aorus Elite like Wi-Fi 7 ICE or non-ICE version, these actually kind of make a lot of sense for me, because it's like I do get the post code, which very helpful when doing a lot of memory overclocking. It still has the same memory topology as even the Pro. So it's very representative of it's the same topology as the, X870E Elite, the X870 Aorus Pro. So it's like very convenient in that, like, oh, testing from the Elite is also representative for testing of the Aorus Pro board, right? And it's cheaper, but it's only a little bit cheaper. If I remember correctly, it's like $30. Actually, I'm just going to pull up PC Part Picker. So that's kind of the reason why I'm not a big fan of the regular X870. Is you lose, in my opinion, like the PCIe functionality loss on that board, considering how little of a price difference it is. Because yeah, so we've got the X870 Aorus Elite at $319, and then you have the the regular board. Yeah, it's like $30 cheaper. But like, again, though, if you don't care about that PCIe situation, then, saving $30 is $30. You can go spend that on a better memory kit or a better cooler or something that actually, like, improves the performance of your PC. So it's not nothing, but it's not much, considering that, like, it's like they're literally removing the entire second chipset from the board, and the board is only $30 cheaper. To me, is kind of like, man, that's a bit of a disappointment. Like, I'd expect a bit more of a discount for, giving up an entire second chipset. But yeah, it's not much of a discount. It's just $30 cheaper. But I think for, like, the purposes of, like, my testing, that's like perfectly okay, because I don't actually intend to, like, daily this board or anything. But yeah, that is one thing I'm not a big fan of with the non-E boards from Gigabyte, where it's just like, oh, the PCIe, like, as you progress down the product stack, you have to think about the PCIe lane allocation more and more. Anyway, moving on, we got this thing. Now, this doesn't have a postcode, so I already don't like it. And actually, this board and the Eagle and where's the, like, super cheap one? There. Wait, that's a B850. No. I wanted the X870. Yeah. So these three boards are basically all the same board. And these are kind of funny to me. So yeah. Yeah, so I do remember correctly. So these three are the same board. Literally the same PCB. And you'll notice, like, wait a minute, but the VRM goes from, like, 16 all the way down to 8 phases. Well, actually, not even 8 phases. Actually, no, this is probably an actual 8 phase. So what's going on here is you'll notice that there's missing inductors. Every other inductor and power stage on this board is actually missing, which means this is probably actually an 8 phase, not a 4+4. Because usually the way the, like, running the PWM signal into 2 power stages at once works, you usually run it into 2 power stages next to each other, because it's just shorter, right? Like, you don't have to do anything fancy with that PWM signal trace. You just run it into the nearest power stage, into the nearest second power stage, right? You hit one and then you hit the other. But yeah, on this board, every other power stage and every other inductor of the V-Core VRM portion is missing. So this is actually, like, this should still be an 8 phase. It's just like half as many power delivery components as the 16 power stage version. Which I find really funny. Like, you rarely see this kind of, like, cost optimization in consumer motherboards, even though this makes a lot of sense to me. Like, I don't get why this is, like, one of the few boards where I've seen this happening. The 14 power stage version is doing the same thing. There's, like, 2 inductors missing up here. Yeah, I think up here we're missing 2 inductors. So this is actually a 7 phase. So you've got an 8 phase with 16 power stages, 7 phase with 14 power stages, and an 8 phase with 8 power stages, which I find absolutely, like I find that really funny. Also, I think it would be kind of interesting to test test this board against this board in terms of, like, VRM behavior. Though I don't like the rest of this board, like, at all. Because you get 2 PCIe 3.0 by 1 slots, which is just like, okay, what are you even going to do with those? The M.2s, however, you do get 1 Gen 5, which is from the CPU, and then you get 2 Gen 4s from the chipset. But yeah, I overall just don't like the PCIe configuration on these 3 boards, because, like, PCIe, like, by 2 slots are not very useful. By 1 slots, it's like, you can put audio cards into these, you can put Wi-Fi into these, but, like, the boards all come with Wi-Fi. So I don't know why you'd be putting Wi-Fi in there, and I don't know why you'd have 2 audio cards. Like, yeah. So I don't like these because the PCIe lane allocation on these is not great. You also don't get a postcode on any of them. You do get a power button and a reset button, but quite frankly, I'd rather have a postcode than a power button or a reset button. And in terms of actual rear I/O, they're actually not bad, but, not great. And so I don't like these. I do find the, like, cost optimization of the VRM very interesting from, like, a motherboard design perspective. But as actual motherboards that I'd, like, want to build a system with, no. No, I wouldn't. I would not build a system with any of these. Not because they're necessarily bad, I just, like, the feature set just doesn't really, the feature set on these just kind of looks kind of horrible. So, yeah, so that's the X870 Gaming boards, and they're not great, as far as I'm concerned. They will play games, though, right? Yeah, so now we're going to move on to, I guess, the B850s, which I haven't seen yet. So I've already looked at the X870 lineup because I wanted to make a video like this before. How is this still showing up? I just unticked X870. What are you doing? Oh, there we go. Yeah, but I haven't looked at the B850s, so this is going to be a mess. Let's get rid of B840. That didn't help. I was hoping it would be an order from, like, highest end to lowest end, but nope, that's not gonna happen. Okay, let's see. What is this? Oh, this is a 4-layer? They can do DDR5 on a 4-layer? Oh, no. Actually, I've known that they've been able to do DDR5 on a 4-layer, but it's not very good DDR5. Well, at least it's on power stages instead of discrete MOSFETs, because if it was on discrete MOSFETs, oh boy. Because Gigabyte only knows one flavor of discrete MOSFET these days, and those MOSFETs are terrible. I'd rather have a B650M-HDV. Is this cheap? Do have some B850s. Okay, I guess it is really cheap, though, because that's $143, and this thing's even worse. Wait, is this worse? It should be worse. I think Eagle is, like, lower end, right? I hope it is, because, man, this is not good. You do still get some basic troubleshooting LEDs on it. There are 4 SATA ports. I don't like... Well... It'll run an X3D chip at stock, but that's not really much of an achievement. Also, it's a 4-layer. Oh, man. If you put a 9950X in this, that, like, the power plane is going to be a problem. Like, the power stages... I mean, the power stages are also going to be a problem, but, like, the PCB itself is actually going to start becoming a problem for that amount of current draw. Yeah, I would most definitely not put a 9950X in this. Because that 4-layer PCB is going to be a problem. Well, at least it's going to be like $120, I guess. Though that's like the same price point as the B650M-HDV, and the B650M-HDV from ASRock can actually run a 9950X just fine. So, you know. I'd get that instead. Anyway, let's see if this is any better. And taking forever to load for some reason. Did my internet die? No. But Gigabyte's website apparently is unhelpful. Hey, this is on a 6-layer PCB. Yeah, you can tell, like, when the PCB is a 4-layer, they don't advertise it. 6-layer mid-loss. So this should be the same memory topology as the Elite. No postcode. Oh, and this finally loaded. Also no postcode. If this had a postcode, that would have been kind of cool. And this should power a 9950X just fine. Also, substantial VRM heatsink on that. This might do it. No, 5 is... Nah. If you point a fan directly at the VRM heatsink, you might be able to get away with it. 9800X3D should be no problem on this. But yeah, this should be the same memory topology as the Elite, which is kind of fun. You do get 2 M.2 slots. Wait, is that 2? Oh, no, that's PCIe switches over there. 60 amp DR MOS. Yeah, this, I wouldn't want to run a 9950X on this. That is a lot of input filtering capacitors. That is weird to see on a Gigabyte motherboard. Especially a low-end Gigabyte motherboard. They have like this is like GPU style stuff where you have like one bulk capacitor for every single power stage. You don't usually see that on motherboards. And yeah, and they support up to 8200 because yeah, it's going to be the same, like it's the same layer count and the same PCB material as the Elite, so it's going to clock memory the same unless somebody, like, if they didn't copy paste the topology, then maybe it wouldn't. But, you know, if you're a motherboard manufacturer and you design a good, strong 6-layer memory topology, why wouldn't you just copy paste it on every single 6-layer board that you have, right? Like, that's just less design effort. Design it once, design it properly, and then just use it on the entire lineup. So yeah, that's not surprising at all to me that they're advertising support up to 8200 on this, because the PCB has enough space for that. So yeah, though I do wonder if maybe on the higher end boards there might not be some more stringent like manufacturing quality control for the PCB, like for the actual PCB, because that can sometimes be a thing with DDR5, that the actual like manufacturing tolerances of the PCB itself can affect the memory overclocking capabilities of the board. Anyway, So I don't like for for a basic X3D system. Wait, what's the connectivity like? It's not that bad. Actually, no, it is. This is 5 USB Type A's. Okay, that's rough. Yeah, it's really rough. There's only 5 USB Type A's on this, and you only get gigabit LAN. I mean, that's actually not my biggest complaint about this. It's the 5 USB Type A's. Like this is well into the territory of like, hey, you're gonna need to do like you're gonna need to buy some accessory to get more USB ports if you're me. Um, but what is this? This is the D3HP, and the DS3H is 143. Yeah, so we don't have prices for this one yet. Okay, well next we have the DS3H, which I'm assuming is like the same thing again. Oh wait, no, this is a cut down version of the VRM from the Elite. Isn't it? Isn't it? Yeah, yeah, it is. This will run a 9950X. Yeah. It should run a 9950X. Kind of interesting to see, like, it is rare that you see unpopulated phases on motherboards like this. Like this valiantly unpopulated. Like usually they bother to at least change the silk screen. I mean, not the silk screen, like the solder mask. So sometimes you'll get boards where you can see, hey, there was supposed to be, you know, footprints here, but they like solder masked over them. But to just have the unpopulated phases, like, well, actually that's just one phase. But to have the unpopulated phase just that visible is kind of weird for a motherboard. But yeah, this should run a 9950X just fine. Or, okay, no, it'll be a bit borderline, but it should be able to do it. I wouldn't overclock a 9950X on this. And this is still, yeah, 6-layer PCB, mid-loss PCB. You get your Gen 5 PCIe slot. You get your two M.2s. It's an MATX. There's not really a lot of space. And the connectivity is actually decent. Yeah, we're up to 7 USB Type A's, and that's, for me, that's like the bare minimum number of USB Type A ports that I require from a motherboard. If it has less than that, I need to start, you know, thinking about like add-in cards for USB ports or like USB to like rear I/O panel things. Anyway, this seems like a reasonable board. I don't, yeah, like, I wouldn't build it with a 99, like, I wouldn't try to base a 9950X build on this unless you're really trying to, you know, cost optimize a render system of some kind. But, and this is $143. Like, that's not bad. And it might actually do DDR5 8000. That's kind of cool. I might test one of these just to, you know, make sure that like it is as good as Gigabyte claims. Though now I'm thinking that this is actually, yeah, this is just a cut down version of this, isn't it? We've got R3 capacitors over here, and this is a 10 power stage version, so full 5-phase configuration, which is like, yeah, this is the 5th phase that's missing on this board, and that's populated on this one. And we got the 3 capacitors next to each other. This is obviously a render, not real photos. I wonder if we have real photos for this board. Because I think that should make them look a lot more similar. That's a render. These are all renders. Yeah, you can tell, like, what component is that? Black square. Well, that's unfortunate. Okay, so I'm guessing this just upgrades the rear I/O again? Not, well, no, not really, no. Yeah, so the DS3H is actually kind of, like, is the Elite, like, a lot more expensive or something? Oh, we don't have a price for the Elite. Well, that's unfortunate. But this should have, like, this should handle a 9950X just fine. Okay, well, let's keep going. B850 Gaming X Wi-Fi. What's the connectivity like? Pretty good. This is basically the same as the DS3H, though. Still a 6-layer, this time the full 10 power stages. Yeah, I think these are all using the same VRM. Actually, no, maybe the Elite really does have it slightly shuffled around. Because, like, no, because I think this heatsink just, like, you can see how it's, like, overhanging the capacitors more, and here it, like, this heatsink is pushed back, so it's like, yeah, you'd see... I think these are all the same VRM. Because that, like, again, that would just make a lot of sense. So, yeah, though this one doesn't have the... Yeah, this one doesn't have the power button. I'm assuming that's a power button. It doesn't say. But yeah, it's going to be a power button. This should clock memory the same again. We still only get 2 M.2 slots. It's an M.ATX. There's not really that much space. Though it's kind of funny. You can find ITX boards that'll fit 3 M.2 slots. So at the same time, like I say, oh, there's not much space. But then again, those ITX boards that squeeze in 3 M.2 slots also tend to be like twice the price of a board like this. So, you know, some of that is down to the fact that those ITX boards that squeeze in a ton of M.2 slots tend to also be really expensive. And this is supposed to be like a budget M.ATX option. Yeah, you know what? I would totally be I'd be perfectly happy to stick a 9950X in this. I don't see any reason this should have issues with a 9950X. And it should clock memory the same as the Elite again, because it's going to be the same memory topology. So I quite like this board. You also get your 2.5 gig LAN. Is it like $200 though? Because that would like ruin it. It is like $200. Wait, no, that's the ATX version. Oh, so we don't have a price for the M.ATX version. It's probably going to be kind of too expensive. Maybe it'll be like 180 or something. Which is kind of not great. There's a white version of the Elite. Do you have a price for that one? No. But yeah, this really is just a white version of that. Wait a minute. No, this is a different VRM. Oh, this is B850M. Oh, yeah, okay. So this is a different VRM. Finally. Okay. So 6-phase, 12 power stages. So yeah, this should really not, like, you can put a 9950X in this and it won't be a problem whatsoever. PCIe configuration is still the same as always. This is going to be like $200, isn't it? It's kind of not great. There is a power button and some troubleshooting LEDs. I'd rather have a postcode. How's the connectivity? Oh, this is good. Oh, I really like this. This is just a ton of USB Type A. And that's everything I ever want. That's all I really want from a rear I/O on a motherboard. So yeah, like the one concern I have with this board is it looks like it'll be expensive. But yeah, I do like that rear I/O. That's just a lot of USB Type A, and that's all I ever really want from a motherboard. We have an ITX. I might actually buy this one, depending on 10-layer, because I think that's the same as the X870 ITX. Oh, I forgot to go over that one. Yeah. But I think that's the same layer count as the X870. If it is, yeah, 10-layer, 10-layer. Though they're not advertising, oh, this is going to be power stages, isn't it? I mean, DRMOS components, which is a type of power stage. Wait, no, it's on smart power stages. Then again, these 110, well, I'm mainly interested in these ITX boards for like their memory overclocking capabilities, not the power delivery. This claims support for 8400. Does this claim support for 8400? It does. Oh, but that's with the APUs, not 9000 series. Um, I think with the ITX boards, I'll buy whichever one is cheaper. Because, like, on one hand, like, the 110 amp power stages, like, the 110 amp power stages might actually help with running, running the, like, 9950X. And on ITX, that is quite a challenge because there's just not that much space. But in terms of memory overclocking, it shouldn't make a difference. And I think the actual, like, VRM configuration should be about the same. And then, like, the main benefit of X870 is that, like, it's supposed to have extra connectivity, but it's an ITX board. There's not enough space for connectors. So that's like I don't get why, like, especially Asus makes, like, high-end chipset ITX boards when it's like there is physically not enough space on this board to take advantage of all the connectivity that the chipset offers. Why are you doing this? But yeah, so this has 6 Type A's, which is, like, this is about what I would expect from my ITX board. There's just not enough space on these. Oh, this only has 2 SATA ports, which is a bit disappointing, because quite a lot of ITX boards manage to squeeze in 4, so 2 is a bit lame. And I imagine this only has 2 M.2 slots, right? One on the front and one on the back, yeah. They managed to squeeze in some troubleshooting LEDs. Kind of looks like maybe. Like, I'm wondering what that is over there. But, yeah, so I might buy this just to test out the 10-layer 1 DIMM per channel topology from Gigabyte. That's not a priority. Obviously, I'm getting the, like, I want to get a 6-layer board that's representative of the, like, vast majority of Gigabyte's lineup, rather than the ITXs, because there's only 2 of those, right? But yeah, so that's an interesting board. Then we have the B850. Oh no, this looks familiar, doesn't it? No, actually, no, it doesn't. It's different. This is a just a 6-phase. I don't like it. What is that? Seriously, what are you even gonna do? Like, what? Yeah, I don't like it. 3 audio cards. Like, no. And the connectivity is... that's not that bad. Is it cheap or something? I don't think so, is it? Because this is B850 Gaming Wi-Fi 6. Okay. B850. Oh, we don't have a price for that one. But yeah, I don't like this. This feels like an overgrown MATX board, where it's like we have all these PCIe slots that you can't use. Actually, this is one thing I'm kind of wondering about, is why do so many of the MATX boards bother with that bottom PCIe slot? Because if you have, like, a high-end GPU these days, there's a decent chance your GPU will cover up that bottom PCIe slot. Like, you won't be able to fit anything in there because of your stupid GPU. So why don't they make an MATX that just ditches that bottom PCIe slot and gives you, like, 3 M.2 slots, or even 4, right? Like, you could have 3 on the front and 1 on the back. Or something like that. But, yeah. Anyway, so that's the Wi-Fi 6, and then we have the Eagle again. Which is the same thing. Look at all those by ones. Oh wait, more phases this time. I still don't like it. Did the connectivity change? No. So I like it even less. So it's more expensive and it doesn't really do anything significantly better. And then we have the Gaming X Wi-Fi 6E. Okay, we finally have a PCIe. Yeah, no. And the rear I/O hasn't really changed much, in my opinion. Again, I'm biased towards quantity of Type A ports rather than type of Type A port. Yeah, I don't like it. Like, this is just overgrown MATX again. Um, so, B850 Aorus Elite Wi-Fi 7. Please have a postcode. Please, please, there's no postcode. My disappointment is immeasurable. And day is ruined. You know, the funny thing is, this probably isn't even that cheap anyway, is it? Yeah, well, actually, no, it's just $230, so that's not that bad. I was like, oh, this is going to be, because, like, I was like, oh, this is going to be one of those B850 boards that cost as much as an X870, but has half the features. I like the rear I/O. That's a lot of Type A. I'm simple. I see Type A, and, like, uh, I'm happy. But, yeah, I really wish this had a postcode. And unfortunately, the PCIe line allocation is still kind of horrible, but that's just a limitation of the chipset. Right? Like, unless they do the thing they do on the X870s where they start, like, stealing lanes from the GPU, there's just no way to get, because one of these M.2 slots is, like, PCIe lanes that would be used for one of the PCIe slots. So what I think is kind of funny, I think the MATX boards might actually have, like, more, like, a PCIe allocation that I would actually prefer. Yeah, because you get a 3.0 by 4, which I prefer to a like, anything less than by 4 is it's just not great. Because that's the thing, a lot of the cheaper, like, connectivity cards, like, they're not going to use a high-end PCIe generation because high-speed PCIe is kind of a pain, but very wide PCIe is not really a big deal. Right? So if you look at, like, old networking cards, a lot of those, like, old 10 gig networking cards, a lot of those are, like, 2.0 by 8. And so they're not, like, so those kinds of networking cards are completely useless on modern motherboards because you're not going to have a by 8 PCIe slot to put them in. But anyway, so yeah, I'm not a fan of this because the PCIe line allocation is kind of just not great for an ATX board, because, like, the whole point of ATX is that you have the extra, you know, like, extra space for add-in cards. But what are you going to add in on a, like, on a set of 3.0 by 1s? Like, you could just get an MATX board in that case. Now, obviously, if you have a 4090 and something like this, then you're not going to be able to physically slot anything into that PCIe 3.0 by 4, which kind of makes me wish, like, that like, they could have taken that PCIe 3.0 by 4 and put it at the top and then move the GPU slot one down, and that would have kind of solved that. Though it would have probably made the PCIe routing a lot more annoying for Gigabyte, because that Gen 5 slot, you want it as close to the CPU as possible. So, yeah. Not a fan of the B850 Elite. Because for a full-size ATX board, it's just like the connectivity kind of sucks. Ooh, this is interesting. Oh, this is really interesting. 8-layer. Oh, this is going to be so expensive. Dual X8. Dual 10 gig. Dude. Okay, this board is really cool. Has a postcode. This is going to be like 400. This better not be like $400. That would be stupid. 300. If it's like 300, I think that's actually really cool. Cuz this actually, there's no way. It's got dual 10 gig. I like personally, I don't care about that, but that is just like a really like for some people that is a really cool feature. For me, it's just like for I see this as like, oh man, I wonder how much extra they're gonna charge for that dual 10 gig functionality. Um, I want this though. It has dual XA. It has the 8-layer PCB. Like this is basically a yeah, this is basically the X870 Extreme, but on a B850 chipset. That is so cool. I really want this. I bet it's gonna be such a pain to find though. I love this board. At least on like a theoretical level, like this looks amazing. Like I don't know, maybe in practice it's like horrible, like maybe the voltage regulation is atrocious or something, but like at least on paper this looks really cool. Like look at all these USB ports. And it's got a postcode. Power button, reset button, like dual XA. Like this is kind of like Gigabyte's version of the Tai Chi Lite is what this feels like. Except this might be even cheaper. Um, and in some ways, like the connectivity on this thing is ridiculous. Like I love this thing. I really hope that this isn't another one of those. Like this is one thing that just bugs me about Gigabyte to no end is like occasionally they come up with some really cool motherboard, and then it's impossible to find. And this looks like that, but this looks really cool. I really like this. If the price on this isn't completely insane, though, that AI in the name kind of who knows, but like I'd be willing to tolerate this even up to like $400, I think. If it's less than $400, this is really cool. Cause yeah, the like this is the thing that bugs me when people are like, "Oh, I need a high-end chipset." Why? What does the chipset even do for you? Um like the chipset is basically just a like a thing that spits out extra connectors. Um I'm kind of wondering, like, I'm wondering now if there's like something really whack with the PCIe allocation on this board, but there shouldn't be. Like, I'm not seeing anything that immediately looks like, oh, this is going to be a problem. Because yeah, like obviously the dual X8 support needs a PCIe switch, so that makes perfect sense. But then we get two. I love this board. This like so AMD mandated that so the AM5 CPUs actually have 24 Gen 5 PCIe lanes on them. With X870 and X870E, it is mandated by AMD that one of those X4 sets goes into a bunch of USB Gen 5 ports, right? Like the super high speed USB ports, which I couldn't care less about because literally the only thing I use that has a Type C port on it is my phone. Um, but yeah, so like this, because it's a B850 board, it doesn't need those stupid like high-speed USB ports, and so you just get two Gen 5 M.2 slots directly off of the CPU, and they don't affect the GPU at all, which is awesome. I love that. And then we get this is not this M.2 slot is by 2. Oh, whatever. You could use that as like a bulk storage drive that just doesn't need to be super fast, right? And the SATA ports are apparently not sharing with anything, so that's cool. I do wonder about the two 10 gigs shoved through a PCIe by 4. How much net? Like I'm assuming this is wide enough. It has to be. Like otherwise they wouldn't do this, right? I mean, like this I don't know enough about like networking. But I do wonder, is this going to run out of bandwidth if you're running both of your 10 gigs through the chipset? Um, actually, I think this link is... No, this is a Gen 4 link, isn't it? It's like a AMD, like that's an Intel thing that the chipset is on a Gen 5. Or is it Intel? I don't remember. But I love this board. I think this, like, in terms of just like Feature set, this is so cool. I love that rear IO. There's a post code. It has dual X8 and it's not on X870. I love this thing. I really want one of these. Really, really, really want one of these. Yeah, so I am definitely buying one. Like, I just absolutely have to, because if it's cheaper than the Master, then I get to test the memory topology from the Master, but without having to spend Master money. And like, but then the rest of this, like, this is just such a cool board in terms of connectivity. Bit of a shame about that M.2 slot running at by 2 and the fact that you don't get a PCIe by 4. Like, if they had just put a PCIe switch, a by 4 PCIe switch on this for that, like, that M.2 slot, where you could choose, it's like, hey, I don't actually care about that, like, slow M.2 slot. I just want another add-in card. That would have been so cool. But even then, I think this board is really cool. Like, yeah. Now, like, the main question for me is, like, is the price just going to be completely ridiculous or not? But I'm not seeing any reason it should be completely insane. So, yeah, this is a really cool board. So, basically, my highlights highlights. Like, I want to test the ITX just because it's a different memory topology, and then this thing's just cool. Like, I freaking, like, it does, like, it has all the things, except the thing is, in, like, specifically in the context of my daily system where I do have a capture card, if I bought this board and put my daily system on it, the problem I would run into is my GPU would run at X8, because that capture card needs to go into that X8 slot because it doesn't work on a by 2. But, like, that's not the end of the world. And with a lot of the other Gigabyte boards, that is still technically an issue, because if I had more M.2 drives, like, yeah, the GPU would drop to X8 anyway. But yeah, overall, like, this is just cool. Like, I love that board. And then the other one for me is the X870 Elites. Either of them, depending on ultimately how much you care about your PCIe lane allocation. Right? Like, if you know exactly how many PCIe devices you have, then this board is cool. And if you need more PCIe devices, this board is cooler and slightly more expensive. But yeah, and then in the very low end, like, we do have some interesting options from Gigabyte, right? For, like, B850, B840. With some of the, like, MATX boards, like, those are really not, like, I wouldn't go for that, the Eagle, like, that's horrible, but like, there are certainly, like, sub $200 options. Like, I'd be perfectly, if I remember correctly, this is the one where I was like, oh yeah, I'd be perfectly happy. Yeah, I'd be perfectly happy to stick a 9950X in this. Yeah, so this looks like a really cool budget board. I don't know what the price is going to be. I'm assuming somewhere between $200 and $150. And, like, yeah, you could run a 9950X on it, right? So, like, neat. But man, this AI top board, I did not, like, I had no idea this was coming. This is really cool. I want one. I really hope I get my hands on it. Anyway, that'll be it for the video. So, yeah. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, leave any comments, questions, suggestions down in the comment section below. And if you'd like to support what I do here with the channel, there are links in the description that you could check out, and that would be very much appreciated. So, yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.